morning, everyone. If somebody could just comment just to let me know that you guys can hear me and see me okay, that'd be great. So let me know if you can hear me and see me, and then we'll get started. Morning, Beth. Kirsty. Fabulous. Brilliant. Good morning. Perfect. So, a few weeks ago, I did another live talk for the Veterinary Dog Conference talking about force-free boarding kennels. And when the opportunity came back up again to do another one, I thought about talking about something a little bit different that I think a lot of owners do need to have a talk about, obviously, when it comes to rescue dogs. So a little bit about me, just as a bit of a background anyway. I think I knew when I was little, I always wanted to work with dogs. Dogs was sort of where my life was going to go. I caught the dog training bug quite young, and I knew over doing lots of courses and going to uni and everything like that, that dog training and behaviour was really the route that I wanted to go down. And I was very fortunate to spend a lot of time in rescue when I was younger, getting to know loads of different dogs, getting to see how rescues worked. And then I've been very, very fortunate to end up in a position where I get loads of referrals from smaller rescues, larger rescues for dog training and behaviour work as well. So I have been very fortunate to be working with so many fabulous rescues and so many smaller rescues as well, for loads of different reasons, whether it's just basic training or more behavioural problems as well. And then I started my own dog training and behaviour business in 2018, which is sort of where the rescue route started, and I started helping local rescues out with consultations and things like that. So today I am here to talk all things about rescue dogs. So just to give a bit of a background really about rescue dogs, sometimes things that they can come with, but also to try and break that perception that all rescue dogs comes with problems, because I think that is quite a common thing that, especially on social media, we see these days, where owners are going out looking for a dog, but they automatically say they don't want to go to a rescue because they know they're going to get a dog with problems. And it's the same with every dog. Every dog, just like every human, can have a problem. There's no way in saying that every single rescue dog will, and every dog that doesn't come from a rescue won't. And it's really trying to break that perception, because if you think about it in human terms, every single human, we all have dislikes, we all have things we don't like that much, we all have phobias, we all have fears, and that's exactly the same as dogs. So it's trying to break that perception that just because a dog has come from a rescue or a shelter or a charitable organisation, it doesn't mean they're going to come with loads and loads and loads of baggage. So when talking about rescue dogs, what do I actually mean? Because usually when we talk about rescue dogs, we talk about dogs that have come from sort of a charitable organisation, a rescue centre, an organisation that has gone into that centre looking to be rehomed or be fostered or sponsored or something down that route. But sometimes when we are talking about rescues, we are also talking about individual dogs that have been rescued from a particular environment. So not necessarily gone down the charity route, but dogs that might have actually gone down more of a personal adopted route. So there are two different kinds of rescues as well. It's also important to remember that dogs that are in rescues can be any breed. They can be any age, and there's not going to be two dogs in a rescue that are going to be the same. So every single dog is completely different. And to be honest, that's one of the things I love the most about rescues, is because you're never going to find a dog that's the same. Everybody's their own personality. Everybody's got their own temperament. And I think that's one of the best things about rescues, is there's so much love going on in there. It's brilliant. And there are loads and loads of different rescues out there, and some take all animals, which is amazing. You've got rescues that will take farm animals to small animals, everything. You've got rescues that will just take dogs, And you've got two different sort of dog rescues as well. You've got ones that will take any breed of dog, anyone that needs that help, or you've got the breed specific rescues as well, which are really good because they tend to focus more on that specific breed, the cross breeds of that breed, because they tend to know more about that breed than others as well. So there's those two sort of dog rescues out there. Then looking at how dogs can end up in a rescue, there's no set reason as to why a dog can end up in rescue at all. It's the exact same with any animal on this planet. Any animal can end up in a rescue, and it is a really, really sad thing to see. A lot of dogs will end up in rescue for a lot of common reasons, but I think also for anybody that's watching and anyone that does watch this, anyone that works in rescue, they'll probably agree that there's always going to be a day where there's something new that comes in and you think, I've never heard that before. So there's a lot of common reasons why animals will end up in a rescue or a shelter, but there's also some brand new reasons which aren't actually that common. But some of the most common one obviously starts with behavioural problems. That is a really, really common thing that does happen. And when we class behavioural problems, we're not necessarily just talking about dogs that are reactive or dogs that don't like people or anything like that at all. We're covering a massive spectrum. So that could be dogs that have separation anxiety, dogs that resource guard, so many different things. And it does depend completely on that household. So is that dog fitting in with that household? So a lot of time dogs do come into rescue because of a behavioural related issue, and that might not be working in the household that they're in. You do obviously get puppies as well, lots of puppies and lots of young dogs which have been brought sometimes as presents, sometimes as gifts, or just might have been adopted, but actually the breed isn't necessarily right for the family, or the owners have just realised that actually having a puppy is a lot of work, because they're not easy. It's like having a newborn baby, and sometimes I think that owners can think having a puppy is very cute and it's very fluffy and it's brilliant, and it is an amazing experience having a puppy, but they are also a tremendous amount of work. And when you've got a really busy lifestyle, sometimes having a puppy isn't always the best thing to do. Other things are things like moving home. If an owner's moving home, whether it's to another rented accommodation, or just moving house to somewhere where they can't have a dog. If they're unable to take the dog, it's quite common that dogs will end up in a rescue that way. Sort of going along the lines of families no longer wanting them. And it is something that is really sad to talk about, but it is something that is common, is that families decide actually they don't want the dog anymore. And I think when the dog is in that situation, they have no idea what's going on. So it is really heartbreaking, but it does happen. Families no longer want the dog. And that also comes with age as well. Dogs that are older and might be becoming incontinent, anything like that, and actually that sort of issue is becoming a little bit too much work for the owners, and actually they decide they don't want an old dog and they would like a puppy or they'd like a younger dog to do stuff with as a family. So the age and sort of families no longer wanting them, that does be quite common as well. Also looking at other things like allergic reactions. People can develop allergic reactions to dogs, dog hair, dog saliva, same as cats, same as any animal really. And sometimes until you've got a dog, you don't actually know that you are allergic, especially if you haven't actually spent that much time around dogs. So that can be quite common as well, allergies, and generally just not having enough time. If especially owners that do have breeds that do require a lot of exercise, a lot of working, anything like that, sometimes actually they find the dog might be becoming destructive, anything like that. And actually the reason why is because the dog needs a lot more time than they thought. That is something that's very common, especially when you get puppies. So especially if you've got a really nice, cute puppy, and the puppy's starting to grow up, and actually the owners are starting to realise this is becoming a lot more work than I thought. So it all goes into researching about the breeds and actually finding out what those traits are within that breed. So looking at what kind of rescues there are out there. So like I said, we've got breed-specific rescues, which are fabulous because they tend to focus just on that breed or the crossbreeds and mixes within that breed. So for those dogs, they're usually going to somewhere which will only focus on that breed because they know most about that breed, which is excellent. Generalised rescues will tend to take anything. So any kind of breed, anything at all. And then obviously you have overseas rescues as well, which will work with rescues within the UK, and they can transport dogs from other European countries into the UK. The most common ones tend to be Romania and Greece, but Hungary, there's absolutely loads in there that do transport dogs from overseas to the UK. And all these different rescues have completely different environments. So the most common rescue environment that we think of is the kennel. And that is your most typical rescue environment. A lot of the big organisations, dogs will be in kennels. But you do also get smaller rescues as well, which sort of do a home from home situation. And those rescues do tend to be smaller because they have the dogs in their houses themselves. So you can have the kennel environment, you can have the home environment, and then those dogs that aren't coping in the kennels, we can go down the foster route for. So usually rescues will have a brilliant backup of fosterers who can take the dog on if the dog really isn't coping in the kennel environment, which is brilliant. And then you do also have dogs that become sponsor dogs, or long-term rescues, as it were. So to avoid them being put down, they might stay in that kennel environment for the rest of their life, or in that home environment for the rest of their life, like long-term fosters. And that's purely because if the dog has been to numerous homes, or actually the kennel environment is much better for that dog, it might be that actually that's the best place for that dog. So there's loads of different ways that rescues can go about things. There's loads of different styles of rescues out there as well. So when we're looking at dogs in rescues and adopting dogs in rescues, when you tend to go on a rescue website or a Facebook page, you'll typically have a picture of the dog, and then you'll have sort of a bio about the dog as well, which sort of has your name, age, breed, and then sort of a bit of information as well. And when looking at that information, we see dog testing, can they live with cats, and can they live with kids quite commonly on there. So what will go through rescues is they will personally do assessments within rescue, so to see how they react around other dogs, to see how they react around cats and small animals if they have access to them, and also children. Now, that's not to say that every rescue will go out and find children and babies to just test the dogs around, because it's not like that at all. But it's also going off that information that you might see on Facebook or you might see on a website. It's also going off what that dog has previously experienced before they went into a rescue. So if you do have a dog that was a hand-in that you actually have quite a lot of information about, which is brilliant, and that dog and that family didn't work well because they had young children, that might already be a red flag to say when readopting, young children might not be the best thing. So little things like that, any information the rescue can have before they start the adoption process again is absolutely amazing, because it means they can try and pair that dog up to the right house. But they do brilliant tests. You can see if dogs, how they react to other dogs around in different environments, cats, small animals. I know some rescues have access to livestock as well, so they can see how they are around cows and sheep, just going out on walks and see how they react to them in a distance, and horses. So there's loads of different things. It is very rescue dependent what they're able to test against, but it is a very common thing that all those dogs should be tested. So when we're looking at what to expect when getting a rescue dog, so this is what I really wanted to talk about today, because I think it's quite common. Like I said, it's a common misconception that everybody's going to come with problems, and there's going to be a lot of baggage. Now, it is definitely true that dogs can have problems. We all know that, but that is not rescue related. That is any dog on the planet, anybody, any human can have an issue. That's nothing we don't already know about. But when getting a rescue dog, one of the biggest things we need to focus on is needing plenty of time. So needing time to settle into the house, to get used to the new people, absolutely everything. And this can take months, especially depending on the background the dog has come from. So if you're looking at a dog that has previously never lived in a home, it might have been a street dog, and those dogs that might never have had any home related experiences, there's a high chance they're going to go into a home and think this is really, really scary, because there's so much new stuff going on that is really, really scary to that dog. So you're looking at a very long process there. if you've got a dog that, for example, has been in a home all its life and it's only actually been in the rescue process for a couple of weeks, a couple of months, actually they might find adapting to the home environment quite easy because they've already been in a home before, so they know what the common process is of a household. But you do get so many different dogs that have come into rescue. You get ones that have been abused, you get ones that have come from puppy farms, dogs that have come from abroad. So there's so many different kinds of dogs that are going into rescues. It's so rescue dog dependent how they're going to cope in the home and how long it's going to take them to settle in. It's also, I saw in the event, Trisha put a comment about the dog starting off okay and being perfect, and then the triggers starting to arise. And I think that is quite common because it's looking at the background of the dog. And if we don't know much background about that dog, it is so much easier said than done to start trying to think, why is the dog doing this? But for example, if a dog came from an environment where the dog didn't like transport, the dog didn't like cars, and the rescue aren't going to know that because they don't know necessarily what's really happened, but we know for a fact that dog doesn't like cars. And the dog has started reacting to cars, the sound of the cars turning on, car keys, anything related to cars, and that trigger has started to arise. We might think, right, what has happened in that past experience before the rescue with a car? What is that problem that was there? And things like that is, especially when a dog comes into a new home, they're spending so much time trying to settle in and adapt to this new way of life that sometimes those triggers and those scary things can just go missed because there's so many other things to focus on that sometimes that other scary thing just goes past because there's so many other things that the dog's having to focus on. So you might find that once the dog starts to settle in, that actually those things start to appear because the dog's starting to become a little bit more settled, starting to become more aware of their surroundings, aware of who's there, who's not there, the sounds, the noises, the smells, everything going on in that environment. And then actually those scary things can start appearing, and that's where your behaviours that you're starting to see might arise. So again, with working through stuff like that, it's a case of finding a brilliant, force-free, reward-based behaviourist, and working through it at the dog's pace, because like I said, unless you have a dog which you know the information, you know the background from through that rescue, which is excellent, there's so often we don't have a clue about the background of the dogs. So trying to work with a behaviourist and working out, right, why is that dog reacting like that? How can we make it better for that dog is the way forward with that. And a lot of rescues will work alongside behaviourists or have a behaviourist. If it's a larger organisation, they'll have clinical behaviourists that are working with them as well. So getting in contact with the rescue and explaining, this is the situation, how can I help my dog? They will probably point you in the direction of a reward-based, force-free behaviourist who can then give you some guidance and help the dog out individually that way. It's also, like I said, important to remember that, you know, when taking a dog home, we're looking at a completely new environment, new people, new smells, and they're going to be experiencing a lot of things that they might not have ever experienced before. So dogs, like I said, that have already come from a home environment, or have had some sort of home experience might find it that little bit easier than other dogs. It's not to say they definitely will, but they might do. And I think common things when adopting a dog that we don't think about, and this goes as a generalised whole for any dog, is there's a lot of things in our human life which we just think of as normal. So we think of things like normal household appliances, opening doors, coming home, dropping our keys on the floor, putting our coat on the table, that sort of thing. We just think of that as normal to us. So when you've got a new dog that's come in to that home environment and who might have never been in a home environment before, and suddenly all these things are happening, that can be a lot for the dog to process. And that can be quite scary because there's a lot of sounds, a lot of new things, there's a lot of movement going on in one go. So things that we don't tend to consider that much when adopting a dog is the things that are going on in our household. So things like noisy household appliances. So again, it's something to think, if you might be sitting on your sofa right now, look around your room and think, what have I got in this room that makes a noise? Because anything from washing machines, dishwashers, tumble dryers, televisions, doorbells, absolutely everything, hoovers, all these things tend to be larger objects that make a lot of noise. They don't tend to make the same noise. They make all sorts of weird noises. And they can be really, really scary to our dogs. And the way to think of it is if you were a little toddler and you suddenly went into a room and you heard all these noises, it's going to be really, really frightening. So hearing those noises, especially for the first time, and not having a clue where it's coming from or what it is going to be quite scary. I know I just said doorbells, but doorbells can be a massive one because doorbells tend to be very, very loud. And to a dog, if you can hear a large, loud sound like that all around a house, that's going to be quite stressful because we have no idea where that sound's just come from. We can hear it everywhere. What does that mean? And usually that will then follow with someone either knocking on the door or someone coming through the door. So again, for dogs that have just moved into a house, trying to sometimes avoid using doorbells until they've been associated with a good thing can sometimes really help because those doorbells can be really, really loud. Other things that we don't necessarily always consider in our houses is stairs. So a lot of dogs that have come from the rescue, maybe streets, have come from another country, or maybe have lived in a flat all their life, they might not have actually known what stairs are. And it is something that I've seen quite a lot where dogs have come home and the owners say to me, well, they won't go upstairs. And it's a question of, is it they want to go upstairs, but they don't know how to use the stairs, or they just don't want to go upstairs? And really commonly it's because dogs don't understand that stairs are there to go up and how to use them. So it's really basic things like that, like doors. How do they open? Glass doors can be quite scary as well because dogs can see through, but they can't go through. So looking at these things within our household and thinking, actually, that could actually make quite a difference to that dog's life. How can we make that better, and how can we help that dog through those situations? Other things like traffic, I know that's not in your house, but it's around your house. If you've got a dog that's come through rescue that's previously lived in a countryside where there's really nothing going on, to then go and live in quite a built up area with lots of cars, motorbikes, lorries, that's going to be quite scary. They're so noisy, especially things like trains and buses. You can get a lot of noise coming off those, and obviously you get the vibrations as well. So working out actually from the past, has that dog really been around traffic? And if so, was the dog okay? Asking these questions to the rescue. There's a high chance the rescue might not know, but obviously if dogs do get walked off site at the rescue, they might have actually thought, okay, that's fine, the dog hasn't reacted to cars with us, or they might be able to give you that little bit of information. Thinking about other things as well, like wildlife, horses, farm animals. Quite a lot of dogs actually don't see these things. So although we tend to walk our dogs in wonderful empty areas with lovely green grass, everything like that, we go on lovely, wonderful walks, how often on our walks are we actually seeing wildlife, and how often on our walks are we actually making positive associations with horses and farm animals and cows and the sounds they make as well? So when we are going on walks, I always say every day is a training opportunity. Every day. There's nothing, when you go out of your house, you can always do some sort of training. Regardless of what it is, there's something you can do. And it's making sure that those associations with those things are really positive. So they're not scary things. They're not cows and horses, because they're quite big animals. They're not scary. Again, like I said, I touched on sounds with things like doorbells, alarm clocks as well, anything that can make an unfamiliar noise. And I think a lot of the time we don't think of these things because for us it's normal, but the way that I say it to any new owners that are getting a rescue is stand in each room and make a list of anything at all that could possibly be an issue, and then think, right, how can we make that better for the dog? And working with a behaviourist and working with the rescue and thinking, right, will that dog actually like that? Will the dog not? And then another thing is delivery drivers. So postmen, unknown people coming to the house. Again, you have that association with doorbells, but unknown people coming to the house, that can be quite scary too, especially if you have only been in that house for a few weeks, even if you are a new dog to that house and the only people you've learned are your humans, your caregivers, and then coming into a house and finally starting to settle in a little bit, even if that is only a tiny bit, and then having some random person appear at your house, it can be pretty scary. So thinking about those things, and if you are taking on a new dog, trying to avoid those visitors, unless they're going to be really, really regular visitors on a daily basis, trying to avoid those visitors and those people coming on your house while that dog is settling in, just because that dog wants to just feel safe, and you need to give that dog plenty of time for that to happen. And, you know, that's not going to be an overnight fix. Things that we need to do to help our dogs, again, like I said about standing in a room and thinking, what actually in this room might my dog not like? We also need to think about how we can help them learn. So when taking home a rescue dog, a lot of the time, puppies and younger dogs, we naturally have that expectation that we might need to do a bit of toilet training. We might need to practice a few sits and a few downs and that sort of thing. We sometimes forget that taking home a middle-aged dog is exactly the same. So when you're taking any dog from a rescue, especially if they've been in rescue for a long, long time, dogs might have completely thought, right, so I've now adapted to the kennel environment, so this is where I toilet, this is where I eat, this is where I do this, that and the other. So we need to consider every single new dog coming out of rescue into our home that we're still going to have to help them learn. So helping them learn about toilet training, where is appropriate to go to the toilet, and where they can go to the toilet, making sure we're taking them out regularly so they know that where they are going and that they can go to the toilet as well. Also helping them learn the new things in their home, and that is things like stairs, learning what a doorbell is, learning what a hoover is. So those things that we take for granted sometimes just as humans, we need to then try and help our dogs think, right, actually, this is normal, this isn't a scary thing. And sometimes, especially for those dogs that are a little bit more nervous or a little bit more anxious, building that up, it can be a really long process. But the biggest thing that I always say, and I know that rescues say it as well, is that when taking home a new dog and just naturally getting the hoover out to quickly whiz it around your house, the chances are that's not going to go very well. You want to make these things really, really positive. You want to make everything a really good experience so that when actually the hoover does come out, the dog thinks, oh yeah, that's cool, that's absolutely fine. So doing all these things at the dog's pace, making sure the dog is settled in, and also rewarding the dog for being okay around those situations. And if you notice, actually, my dog's really anxious, my dog doesn't like that, turn it off, we'll work something out. So that's when you get in touch with a behaviourist or a rescue and think, right, before I go any further, what am I doing and how can I make this better? Rather than trial and error, just get in contact with somebody who might be able to say, right, this is how we're going to do it and this is how we're going to make it better for that dog. We also think of things like lead walking, recall, greeting strangers appropriately, resource guarding. These are common things that a lot of the time dogs will go into a new home from a rescue, and then a couple of months of being in the rescue, the owners say, my dog's absolutely pulling my arm out the socket, my dog doesn't come back, this, that and the other. And it's important to remember that even if the dog in a previous household had excellent loose lead walking skills, there's a high chance that that's sort of gone out the window because you've gone into a new house with new people, new commands, so they're probably not using the exact same command the old owners did. So there's lots of new things going on there. So thinking that when you are taking a new dog home, anything like that, you're going to have to restart essentially. Some dogs come, I say, perfectly trained to an extent, so they naturally do all of those things, which is brilliant. But others that don't, they just need that help and that time to get used to those things. So obviously once you have got your dog, doing things like training classes, that sort of thing further down the line can be really, really beneficial for them, especially if you are having problems with recall or lead walking or anything like that. But also looking at one-to-one classes as well, because sometimes not all dogs focus really well in the class environment. So sometimes a one-to-one tutor is a better option for that dog. But it is completely dog dependent, just like any dog, not just rescues, completely dog dependent. Another thing when looking at what to expect is finding out what the dog actually enjoys. Now I know that might sound a little bit cliche because we look at what dogs enjoy and we think treats, toys, squeaky balls, happy days. But actually when we're looking at what our dog enjoys, we need to look at what our dog really doesn't enjoy as well. And that's equally as important as knowing that our dog loves a cocktail sausage. Because actually, if we find out and pinpoint the things that our dogs really don't like, that way we can remove those from the situation and have a much less stressed dog or help that dog get over those fears. So, for example, if you're looking at dogs that have, if you've got a new dog home from a rescue and you roll a tennis ball over to that dog, the dog doesn't really react. Now, is that because the dog has absolutely zero interest in tennis balls at all and you've just got the completely wrong toy? Or Is it because that dog doesn't actually know how to play? So has that dog ever actually had a playful interaction? Has that dog ever had a toy? Does that dog actually have a clue what a tennis ball is for? So looking into those things, because quite commonly we say, actually, my dog's not really a toy dog, or my dog's not really a foodie dog. What food have you tried? What treats have you tried? What toys have you tried? Because if you have a dog that you've only ever tried a tennis ball with, have you tried a squeaky toy? Have you tried a tuggy toy? Have you tried a football? What else is there on the market that you can try? And you do get dogs that are just completely, they couldn't care less about toys, or dogs that couldn't care less about food. And that's absolutely fine. That's completely common. But when looking at our rescue dogs coming home, is it because they don't know how to play, or because they just don't want to, which is absolutely fine. But looking at both of those can sometimes be really important before just ruling off the cards that actually my dog isn't interested in toys, when they might not have actually learned how to play with toys. And then another really important thing, which I think is really important, obviously, to think about when bringing home a rescue dog, is you may find that once the dog is in the home, the dog starts to behave differently. Now, that's touching on my point earlier from one of the comments in the event about the dog being sort of perfect at the beginning and then starting to build triggers. So if you have a dog that's been in kennels for a long time, they've got used to that environment, they've got used to that routine, or even if they've been in a rescue in a home, they've got used to that situation. To then go into a new house and a new home with new people, maybe kids, animals, that's going to be very, very daunting for our dogs, and it can be quite scary. So if you've adopted a dog from kennels, you might find over time that actually that dog, if you suddenly leave it alone for a humongous amount of time throughout the day, the dog becomes destructive. Or you might find that actually the dog starts reacting to people, or the dog starts reacting to other dogs differently. And you start to think, right, why is this now happening? And a lot of the time we take these things for granted because we think the dog's just come out of a kennel environment, so it's almost like a clean slate, when actually it's not at all, because the dog still has all those memories and all those things from kennels, from their previous life, whatever history they have. So it's important to remember that actually by taking a dog home, going into a new house with a comfy sofa and everything like that, that doesn't mean that the dog's just going to suddenly be absolutely fine in 24 hours. It's going to take a long, long time. And it's also really important to remember that actually when working with dogs that have come from kennels where the owners or the new owners are aware that dog has some sort of issues, some sort of behavioural problem, that actually they're fully aware that's not going to just be solved overnight by just going into a home. So it's really important to make sure when you're talking to a rescue, really ruling out, does this dog have any issues at all? And from my experience, 99.9% of the time, owners won't say no. They'll just be like, yep, okay, that's fine, let's work through it. There are obviously some owners out there that don't want those issues, and that's absolutely fine. But it is important to remember to really talk to the rescue and think, right, is there anything, what in particular does this dog struggle with? Because it is important to remember that when a dog comes home from rescue, if they have had a lot of problems or they have been in the kennel environment for far too long and they are really struggling, those issues will not be solved overnight. They're going to take a lot of time and a lot of patience. And obviously leading on to that, the overall thing with rescue dogs is they need a lot of time and a lot of patience. So imagine it as a human being moved from location to location, having no idea who these people are, no idea of the environment. You just ended up in place to place. It's going to be really, really scary. And some dogs settle in much faster than others to new homes. Some dogs just sort of live the life of luxury from the day one, which is brilliant. Others really do struggle. So we've got to remember that not all dogs are the same. You're not going to go to a rescue and get a dog every single year and they're all going to be the same. They're all going to be completely different. So it's remembering that every single dog that is in a rescue, they're not going to be the same, and being able to make your house appropriate and suitable and your household and your lifestyle for that dog. That's not to say you've got to completely change your lifestyle for a dog, but that is to say that just like us humans, if we're scared of something or if we have a phobia or a fear, we tend to try and avoid it. And our friends and our family members, they'll help us out, they'll help us get over those things. If we have a stressful day at work, our friends and our family will help us get through that. And that's how we've got to be to our dogs. We can't just see it as a case of that dog doesn't like the Hoover, get over it, because it's not like that. That dog's scared of that Hoover. So we really need to start thinking about helping our dogs and being there for our dogs rather than a case of just telling them off, because it's not how it works. And then I know obviously one of the comments in the event as well was looking at dogs from abroad coming into the UK. Now I know this is quite a controversial topic, it can be quite a controversial topic, but we do get loads of rescues in the UK that have dogs from abroad. Like I said, commonly Romania, Greece, Hungary. Now a lot of these dogs do come along as street dogs. You do get bait dogs as well, and sadly we do get dogs in the UK from the meat trade. And when you're taking a dog from another country that's not the UK, a couple of things that I think are really, really important to remember for all owners, because they're things that don't tend to get talked about that much, is not only the same as a normal dog coming from a rescue, in that you're going to have a different environment, you're going to have different people. Thinking about the fact they've actually come from a different country. So the chances are they were in a country where it was a completely different temperature, completely different climate. They're now coming to England, and we all know England isn't the best when it comes to weather. So we've got rain, we've got wind, we love snow, we love the rain. And I think coming from sometimes a really hot, sunny country to this can be very daunting, because a lot of the time in those countries, if you have bad weather, you've got bad weather. But we have a lot of wind, we've got a lot of rustling trees, there's all sorts of things like that. So thinking actually they've come from a whole different climate, essentially, over here. Also living in a home. So things to street dogs, dogs from the meat trade, bait dogs, living in a home, that's something that they probably have never done. So even the thought of going through a front door is going to be quite scary. So putting their experience and thinking actually they probably just lived on the street, they didn't probably get much human handling, to then living in a home where they've got a sofa and a TV and bowls and all these sort of things. There's a lot of new things there. So it's really important to remember that actually by getting a dog from overseas, they're going to be exposed to so many new things, as well as obviously our dogs that are coming from the UK, but they're going to be exposed to so many more new things that, you know, we don't even consider. And I think one of the really common things, and I remember it was a brilliant one-to-one I had, was a lovely little dog that had come from another country. And I remember having the conversation with the owners, because she'd eat out of their hands, she'd eat off the floor, she'd eat out of one of their china bowls, but she wouldn't eat out of her dog bowl. And it only took me a couple of seconds to work out that actually the reason why she wasn't eating from that dog bowl was because it was a metal bowl and she could see her reflection. They changed it up to a china bowl and she was absolutely fine. So really thinking about those smaller things, and actually why is that scary to that dog, is beyond important, because sometimes you will sit in a situation with a dog from another country and think, why is my dog doing that? To remember that actually the dog's doing that for whatever reason. So it's also important to look at things like human handling. So a lot of street dogs, a lot of dogs in the meat trade, that sort of thing, they have probably never been handled by humans. Or if they have, it might not have been a brilliant experience. So a lot of dogs that come over from the UK, they are going to need a lot of extra TLC and a lot of extra time just to get used to being touched and to being handled. And that goes for things that to us, for normal dogs in the UK, I say normal dogs that have come from a UK rescue, they tend to be quite, normalised to things like collars, leads, harnesses. You do get loads of rescue dogs that are fearful of those things, so that's not to say that it's a general thing. But dogs that are coming from abroad, a lot of street dogs won't have ever even seen a collar. They might have had one of the poles used on them to get them in a van, but there's a high chance that actually collars and leads and harnesses weren't used over there. So thinking about those things when the dog comes into the UK, is that going to be something that's scary for the dog? Because it's probably going to be very unfamiliar. And it's things we take for granted with dogs that are in the UK rescue centres that have had these experiences. You do obviously get dogs that we find on the streets in the UK. That's also not common. We do get strays. But again, dogs that are already in the UK sometimes find it that little bit easier because they haven't just had to come from a completely different country. And that sort of thing. So it's important to remember that regardless of where the dog actually comes from, they're always going to have to adjust. And we always need to make sure we give them plenty of time, plenty of TLC to adjust, and lots of patience, lots of treats, lots of rewards, and making everything a really positive experience. And obviously looking at that as well, being around things like children and animals. Some street dogs live in big groups of dogs, some live completely on their own. And children as well, I think children can be quite a scary thing to all dogs. Now, that's not to say that every dog is going to find children scary at all, but actually looking at children, we sometimes see dogs that react differently around children than they do adults. And a lot of the time it's looking at actually why is that child, why is the dog reacting around that child? And first of all, obviously they're going to be acting very different, especially the age of the child, they're probably going to act a lot different, but they're also quite small. So if we look at toddlers are very tiny people and they make a lot of different noises. Sometimes they're quite touchy-feely, and not all of our dogs like that. So looking at actually when a dog comes over from the UK, what's the chances they've been exposed to children? Because if they sometimes have a bit of a grumble at a child, there's a high chance that dog has never ever seen a child before. And another thing that I will always point out when it comes to children, which is something people don't think about at all, but is something that I learnt and acknowledged through a one-to-one that I did, was when adults take kids out, I love all these comments saying that children are terrifying. When adults take kids out, one really common thing that parents do is put kids on their shoulders. Now, as a child, we all love doing that, sat on our parents' shoulders. To a dog, that is exceptionally scary because what you're looking at is a very tall person with two heads. So when going out, looking at those people and looking what's around and thinking, actually, is that something that's really new to my dog? Is that something that could be really scary? Because looking at a very tall person with two heads making two different sounds can be very, very scary to our dogs. So what I will do is I'll scroll back through all these comments in a minute. But going off, obviously, the original thing of looking at the misconception that all dogs come with problems. Is it true that rescue dogs naturally come with problems? No, it's not. It's not true at all. The way that I say it is you look at every single human, every single person watching this live, that's going to watch this live, all of us have a fear, all of us have a phobia, all of us have something we don't like, somebody we don't like, and that's normal. So we've got to put that in our dog situation. That's normal for dogs too. They all have things they don't like, they all have other dogs they might not like, they all have fears, they all have phobias. It's normal and that's absolutely fine. And that's completely out of the rescue topic. It's the same as every single dog. Now, you might have dogs out there that just think, happy days, life's amazing, woohoo. But there is a high chance that one day you will find, actually, my dog doesn't like something. And it might take years to find that. Or it might just take a couple of days. But it is really important to think of it in that human way, that we all have issues, we all have problems, and it's the same as our dogs. That's the same as any animal. And it's important to think that actually, if I have loads of different fears and phobias, and a really common one that we always talk about is spiders. So if you're scared of spiders and I was to walk up to you with a handful of spiders and trap you in a room with them, you're going to freak out. It's not going to be nice, it's going to be horrible, it's going to be scary. To a dog that doesn't like men, if I put a dog in a room that doesn't like men, that dog's going to react exactly the same as we would to spiders. So it's thinking about it in that sense and trying to explain that to owners, that actually a dog reacting to something they're scared of, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. That's normal. And that's actually a good thing that they're reacting, because they're telling us they don't like it. And then we can help them through that. So no, it's not every single dog naturally comes with problems from a rescue. You're going to find that every dog has things they don't like, things they like. Yes, don't get me wrong, there are dogs in rescue that are going to come with a bit more baggage. And sometimes you've just got to find the right family for that dog. That's not to say that dog has 101 problems and is never going to be rehomed. But sometimes you do have dogs that just need to find that particular home out there for them. And there are plenty of dogs that come from rescues that don't have any major issues. They're not going to react to everybody. They're not going to react to dogs, whatever it is. And, you know, there might be over time that things do start to show, but there are plenty of dogs that don't have those larger issues. So it is important to think of that not every dog in a rescue is going to come with loads and loads and loads of baggage. And working with a behaviourist as well in rescues is one of the most important things I can say. Making sure that when you are adopting a dog from a rescue, not only you're saying does the rescue have a behaviourist that can help me, or can you recommend to me a behaviourist that will help me should I need help? And making sure they're force-free. Making sure that everything's reward-based and force-free. And if there's something that you're not comfortable with, that's when you can think, right, actually, let's find somebody else that will help me with a force-free method. And I think that is really important. It is, although it would be lovely in the world if every single rescue was force-free. There are, sadly, the same as there are trainers, there are everybody that don't believe in force-free methods. And I think sometimes you do have to go through seeing that, and I think sometimes, especially to owners that aren't really aware of dog training and the right and the wrong ways, they will go along with it because that's just what they're being told. So it's important to remember as well that if an owner's adopted a dog and they have had advice from somebody saying to put a shock collar on or something like that, that actually if they're a first time owner, they haven't really done too much research. It's important to remember that's not really their fault. They've been guided by someone who they thought was a professional in telling them this is actually what's right. So it's just guiding these owners and saying, actually, you know, these things aren't really brilliant. Let's try this instead. And actually, you might sometimes it does take a little bit longer. I know it's been discussed in a lot of the other lives as well that, you know, it is something that's common. Putting a shock collar or a prong collar or something like that on a dog does get faster acting results. Because the dog is scared, the dog's terrified, the dog doesn't want to be hurt. So sometimes those force-free methods can take that little bit longer, whether that's an extra 10 minutes, they can take a little bit longer. But you're building that bond with your dog, you're building that trust, and that's what we want to do with all dogs as well as rescues. We want to make sure that bond's out there. So what I'll do is I'll have a quick scroll through. No labels. So Alistair, so many people don't. Yeah, getting a puppy it's essentially like having a newborn child. That's how I say it to owners. There's so much work out there. And again, when getting a puppy, especially if you're getting a puppy because you want a certain breed, it's really important to make sure you're researching that breed of dog and making sure that dog will actually suit your lifestyle. If you wanted to get quite a high drive breed, making sure you have the time to put into that dog. And all puppies, they're going to need a lot of attention, a lot of TLC. They're going to run you ragged. It will be an amazing experience, but people have got to be prepared to put in a lot of work as well. Huge number of dogs going into rescue would be prevented if breeders were responsible. Makes sense. Yep, completely, Gemma. There are loads of dogs that are ending up in rescues that have come from breeders. And sadly, there is quite a lot that if the owner doesn't want the dog, the breeder won't take the dog back, which is how it sort of gets to that point. And it is a shame. It is a real shame, especially irresponsible breeders. It's not ideal at all, but it is something, again, that does happen. It is another reason why we do have more dogs in rescue. Let's have a look. Kathy. So, Kathy, in regards to your comment with your rescue dog not going in a crate, I can't see the full comment, so I will reply to your comment by text after the live. And the same with yours, Mary, as well. Took a while for my foreign rescue to get used to the television. Now 5 years on, still something's bad. Yeah, I'll reply to those by text just because they are longer, so the Facebook live doesn't let me see them all. Yeah. Terrified of dishwasher doors opening. It's really common. Things like that is something that they're unknown sounds, they're unknown noises, they're unknown household appliances. So making sure that we make all these things really positive experiences is really important. My rescue boy can unlock and open doors. Yep, locking and unlocking doors. It is something as well that outside of sort of the rescue situation, we do see a lot of dogs that have learned, for example, if they wanted to go out to the garden, actually how to open that door. So it is quite important that we make sure our doors are locked, especially for dogs that do know how to get in and out of the house, making sure those doors are always locked. Rachel, again, yeah, Rachel, I'll reply to your comment in text, just because I can't reply over the live because it's a little bit longer, so I can't see the full thing. Beaten up very badly and he was underweight. Yeah, rescue dogs. I mean, you do get dogs, Tracy, that have come from that sort of abused lifestyle. underweight, malnourished, and it is really, really heartbreaking. But I think the best thing that we can do now when we start adopting those dogs is making sure that we do everything, one, at their pace, but two, everything that we possibly can to make them feel better. And sort of take them as they are, and then just we'll work with them, work through everything at their pace. Jackie. Thank you, Jackie. Any recommendations? What I will do again is because I can't see the full comments, so I will reply to the counter conditioning comment in text as well, just because I'm also quite cautious of time as well. Children. Yep, children are very scary. How to calm a rescue dog on lead when he sees other dogs. In regards to that one, Lorraine, my biggest piece of advice with that would be, obviously for that, I'd be looking into how long you've had the dog and what sort of breed the dog is. Actually, why is the dog reacting? Is it excitable? Is it frustration? Is it fear? What sort of reaction are you getting? And then being able to go from there. So by all means, drop me a message if you want, and I'm more than happy to give you some advice on that as well. Buster reacts to puppies and barks. How do I help him? Tracy as well reacts to puppies and barks and lunges at them. How do I help him? Perfect. Yeah. So in terms again of barking and lunging at puppies, what sort of reaction is it? So looking at that sort of thing, there's quite a lot that goes into helping dogs like that. So what I'll say as well, Tracy, is by all means drop me a message, purely because I am that person. I will ask 200 questions, so I can try and help get the best fix possible to help you put you on the right road. So just so I don't take up too much more time, if you drop me a message, I'm more than happy to give you some advice. Trying to find the best way to reassure my dog when he's scared of kids and people who barks and lunges at the situation moves worse than him. Again, Alison, same thing as Lorraine and Tracy, by all means drop me a message. If it does come down to fear, and it's because he's scared, there's a lot of desensitisation and a lot of work that we can do with that. But obviously if he's in that situation, getting him out of that situation is the most important thing. So when we're looking at a dog that is scared or is fearful, or is reacting out of those because they're in a stressful situation, removing them from the situation is the best thing we can do in that moment, and then working through them with a behaviourist, making sure that everything's we've got a really nice behaviour mod plan going on, everything's at the dog's pace basically. Situation. Perfect. So what I'll do is, by all means, I'll comment on some of the comments in text as well for the ones that I can't see the full way, and by all means, anyone that did want to drop me a message, by all means feel free to. I do just want to obviously say thank you again to Ruby for hosting, and obviously everybody that's made this marathon possible now, because so far again I've learned absolutely loads already from the speakers of this marathon, and obviously if anybody has any more questions or wants to know anything more about what I've said, just drop me a message, or drop me a comment on here, and I will do my best to get back to you and reply. But yeah, thank you everybody, and have a wonderful weekend.